How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the Small Talk Show. Today, I'm going to be talking about value insulation in rookie drafts. Now, if you're watching this, you probably play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Welcome in, welcome all. And you're probably in the midst of your Dynasty rookie drafts. It's finally the time to spend the capital you've been accumulating over the past season, the past two, maybe even the past three seasons if you've been in a longer term rebuild. It's generally a dynasty truism that draft picks are the best way to hold value. This is because they're extremely liquid. Any and every manager in your league is going to want picks as opposed to certain players who may be valued similarly to a pick. Rookie picks generally appreciate in value over time as you get closer to the draft. Often the value is highest when you're on the clock in certain leagues. And of course, not being players, picks are immune to performance, injury, or situation. Now, when the pick is made, when the draft button is slammed, when a name is finally attached to that draft pick, the perception of the value of the asset changes. Now, the value is not guaranteed to appreciate. Yes, player values have a lot of upside, especially depending on where certain players are drafted, but they're not guaranteed to go up in value over time. Certain players may not fit any and every manager unless you're, one of the blue chip top two, three picks in a rookie class. And of course, performance, injury, and situation can impact their future value. More interestingly, to analyze from a dynasty industry or space kind of view is the biases certain people, managers have on certain prospects. Now, this could be a team a player is drafted to. For example, the Patriots have a pretty terrible track record of drafting wide receivers. Some managers in your league may not want to draft Jalen Polk or Javon Baker for that reason. But a lot of people also have preconceived notions on these players as prospects. And let me give you a few examples that illustrate this point. Quentin Johnston, a rookie in the 2023 draft class, was very polarizing as a prospect. Now, people didn't like him. He had a terrible first year, and his value has cratered. This is despite being a first round draft pick attached to Justin Herbert, whose target competition has just completely evaporated over the course of this offseason, but his value is down in the dumps. It's around a third round rookie pick value, despite being drafted in the mid to late first in 2023 rookie drafts. Now, Johnston had 38 catches for 431 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns as a rookie. Yeah, pretty terrible. But compare that to Sky Moore, who had 22 catches for 250 receiving yards and 0 regular season touchdowns. He did, of course, have a Super Bowl touchdown in his rookie year. But Sky Moore actually retained his value pretty well heading into his second year in his second offseason. So a year ago from right now, Sky Moore was still drafted reasonably highly in startups and had maybe an early second value as opposed to the late first spent on him. And this isn't just because of Patrick Mahomes, because on the other side of the coin, you have Justin Herbert with Quentin Johnston. But more importantly, Sky Moore was, as a prospect, perceived as pretty neutral to positive across the board. Johnston was very polarizing. People had him on both extremes, but I would say the average perception of Quentin Johnston as a prospect was negative. And that impacted both players' values heading into their second year. So, with players, yes, the upside is there for them to rise tremendously in value, but you have to acknowledge where the floor is, or sometimes even the lack of floor with the value of some of these prospects. It doesn't mean you shouldn't make the actual rookie pick when you're finally on the clock. But different types of assets might suit your team a little bit better. In a rebuild, or if you know your league values a certain position more highly, if you can't trade out of a pick, taking the asset with the safest value, or at least the least potential variance in their value, can help the long term prospects of your team. Even if you don't end up rostering that player when it comes time to compete, even if they aren't a lineup block or even the first name off your bench in a bye week, these players can still be valuable assets as kind of capital to push in at the same price that you paid when it actually comes time to compete. So that's why today's topic is going to be 5 2024 rookies with strong value installation between the 2024 and 2025 rookie drafts. I think that these players, you can at least fetch the same price for them in a year's time as you would pay now to draft one of these rookies in your rookie drafts. Before we get into those players, I'm going to give some examples of ones that are not on this list, ones that I'm going to exclude. Mainly going to cover the wide receivers taken after the big three. A lot of them, while exciting players, I'm drafting in a lot of places, have red flags to their profile, which will mean that they're not going to be completely insulated in a way that a Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors, Romo Dunze will be with the lack of expected production because of performance, situation, or injury. All of the, let's say, even from the late first of Worthy, McConkey, Brian Thomas, Keon Coleman, a very pertinent one. Later on, let's say Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson. There are a lot of ways in which the value of these wide receivers can drop below what you pay for them in 2024. Bo Nix is another good example, especially because I'm going to go on to his sort of counterpart in a little bit. But Bo Nix, another player who really was not liked as a prospect across the board in the dynasty space. I mean, if Michael Penix hadn't gone 8th overall, Bo Nix might be the pick that everyone is talking about and really blasting the Denver Broncos for. The difference between Penix and Nix for fantasy football is Nix is going to start. And while that's right for certain teams, that also gives his value a chance to be affected by performance. I predict Bo Nix to be the starter in 2025. Even if that's the case, if he has a really poor year and a team that people aren't excited about, you're not going to be able to return the late first or early second value that you pay for Bo Nix now. Kenny Pickett is a good example. Had to be taken in the mid to late first in the 2022 rookie draft, and you could not return anywhere near that value in the next year. So with that being said, let's go on to the 5 players that I think will have strong value insulation between 2024 and 2025. And we're going to start with Michael Penix, who, I mean, really is the definition of value insulation. You could say he was the inspiration for this video. And we touched on him a little bit earlier when talking about Bo Nix. But in this case, I mean, if he doesn't play, where's the volatility in his value to come from? I mean, Michael Penix, it's already priced in that he won't start until at least 2026 because of Kirk Cousins' contract. And yes, that is likely, but that's already why a top 8 quarterback on a team with exciting weapons is falling into the second round in a lot of super flex rookie drafts. Now, there are a lot of ways his value can increase a little ahead of schedule. I mean, even short of being announced a starter, let's say Kirk comes in and starts to cook with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, a lot of players people have been excited about for the last couple of years and just not seeing the return on that kind of investment and hype made in these players. If Kirk gets them to produce, their best seasons to date, which is not really too crazy of an ask, the excitement for Michael Penix to step into that situation is going to be even higher. Kirk Cousins is also an older quarterback coming off an Achilles tear. Who knows his health holds up, but it's not a guarantee. And I mean, they spent the 8th overall pick on Michael Penix. Even if the coaches say and they can believe that, yes, we wanted him as the backup to eventually step into the role, there is going to be pressure to make good on such a premium investment. The Falcons is also just such a great situation for a quarterback to step into with those weapons. The Rams pass game coordinator coming over as the OC, expect passing volume to increase a lot. And this is someone who can really become the counterpart to a very desirable fantasy stack if a manager has London or Pitts or even both. Michael Penix, once he does get into the starting role, he's going to get at least 2 to 3 years while still on his rookie contract because of the capital invested on him. So there is a longer term plan, even after holding for a year, for 2 years. So that's why Michael Penix, when you're able to get him around the 112 to 203, I truly believe you can get a 2025 first when it comes to next year. Definitely a 2026 first, most likely an early 2025 second, which is what you're going to have to pay now, but a 2025 first. And why I'm so confident is that is if you take a look at the NFL itself, there are a lot of teams with questionable QB rooms when it comes to having aging starters or ones on a very short leash without much leeway to be a longer term starter if they're not productive in 2024. Give a few examples: Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, Daniel Jones, and Deshaun Watson is I mean, he really should be on this list, but it's an asterisk because of that ridiculous contract. But when you translate this to your fantasy leagues, that's a lot of managers who could be losing their QB2 and their QB3, and the need for and they're going to have a huge need for Penix in their life when that comes to pass. But all jokes aside, QB and Superflex is always a sound investment. And I think at the price you're going to have to pay now, Michael Penix is someone with a lot of value insulation to at least return the same value, but with huge upside if any positive news happens or when inevitably he becomes a starter of the Atlanta Falcons. So then I'm going to move on to my next player. And I did try to order this in draft board order, but I cheated a little bit because I wanted to start with Michael Penix. But my next player is Jonathan Brooks. He is generally going higher than Penix. So I would say the average is around 110, 111. Can't have seen him go at 109, probably as late as 203 if someone wants the QBs, and even as low as Coleman. But Jonathan Brooks is a player with value insulation, and this time it's because of the injury. Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL late into his college season, so it's already priced in that he's going to have a slow start and an unproductive season. I mean, in other words, he can be bad and still have his value stay at least around a late first value. Jonathan Brooks is someone I could pretty safely project as a bell cow for the Panthers going into 2025. Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders both likely to be off the team next year. We'll see how Dave Canales does with Bryce Young, but he's had a tremendous record in recent years of reviving Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith's careers. In addition, Dave Canales really preaches a lot about the importance of the run game, and we just saw what he did with Rachaad White last year, both with the role in the receiving game as well as the really true bell cow kind of workload. Jonathan Brooks had a pretty strong prospect profile. He has a lot of receiving upside. He produced similar numbers to Bijan Robinson in both of their final seasons at Texas, and he plays in a very scarce position. He was the only running back taken in the second round of the 2024 NFL draft. And the way Dynasty is played, especially at the running back position now, he could easily become a top 12 Dynasty market running back without playing too well, just as the other starters from 2024 start to age out. There is a lot of talk about the 2025 rookie running back class being very strong. I've seen people say the RB5 or the RB6 in 2025 would be a better prospect than Jonathan Brooks. And yeah, that may be true. It's too early for me to say. But is the RB5, the RB6, are they going to be going into a situation where they can be the bell cow? It's very hard to say sitting here now. And honestly, pretty unlikely. If you look just a couple of years ago, Zach Charbonnet was a late first round rookie pick, and he didn't go to a situation where he could have a lead spot. So that's why I think Jonathan Brooks will at least be worth a late 2025 first in a year's time, the same price you have to pay for him now, with a lot more upside if he does flash beyond what you would expect the first season off the ACL tear. So moving down the draft board, I do just want to hit on Ricky Pearsall, who didn't make this list. If you can get him around the 205, 206, I do think he fits. I mean, the value installation comes from the expectation one of Debo or Ayuk or both may leave the team before 2025. But I've also seen him go closer to an early second, and there's no guarantee at that point you return the same value if both stay, or we still don't see a high passing volume offense. Purdy struggles a bit. Shanahan leaves. There are a lot of reasons why Pearsall may not be worth an early second in 2025. So he's off this list, though I really do like Ricky Pearsall. I am instead going to go to Jermaine Burton. And this is someone, I wish I made this video a week earlier, because in the last week, we've had more news about T. Higgins not wanting to play on the franchise tag, didn't show up to OTAs. So Burton is actually climbing rookie draft boards as we speak. But I still think you can get him in the late second to the early third in rookie drafts. Now, just some facts about Burton. He was a day 2 pick, round 3, pick 80 to the Cincinnati Bengals. He did fall notably due to attitude issues. Played for both Georgia and Alabama, places with pedigree, but then if the coaches at those institutions thought he had a difficult attitude to work with, what does that say? Not for me to comment, but it really doesn't matter. The average Dynasty manager and even the more experienced manager is still going to place a lot of value on someone who will be catching passes from Joe Burrow. The ceiling scenario for the value is very easy to see, even with very limited to no production in his rookie year, because T. Higgins could leave. And then what does that leave Burton as? Joe Burrow's wide receiver 2 on a high volume pass offense? That's someone who could even be pushing late 2025 first in rookie value. But the value installation here then I think comes in. You could still sell Burton even if Higgins stays for a late second. Tyler Boyd had a lot of fantasy football startable weeks. Burton does have a profile that especially a lot of film watchers do highly rate. Even though he led Alabama in receiving, he didn't have the best production profile. He had a very high ADOT, but I'll put that down to Alabama and Jalen Milrose. They've relied on the vertical game. That's all to say it doesn't even matter if he's a stellar prospect. If attached to Joe Burrow, with or without T. Higgins, this is someone that will easily return the late second value, with a lot more case for that value to rise in the next year based on what happens with Higgins. Moving down the list, and now we're getting to cheaper options. They're going to be a little less exciting, but the point still stays. I still think all of these players have a solid baseline of value where you can at least return what you paid for them in 2024. So the next player on this list is Jalen McMillan, wide receiver out of Washington. He was a day 2 pick, round 3, pick 92 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can get him in the mid to late third in rookie drafts right now. Now, he dealt with some injuries and a lot of competition, obviously in college, with Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk being top 10 and then a top 40 picks. But McMillan still had 1,100 yards as a redshirt sophomore. Now, where the value installation comes in is when you look at the Bucs receiving room, the main players are Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Evans did just sign a 2-year contract to stay with the Bucs, but he's going to be 32 by the start of the 2025 season. Godwin is the interesting one for McMillan. He is on the last year of his deal, but why Godwin's future could be more closely tied than necessarily Evans is Godwin plays in the slot, and that's where McMillan really profiled as. That's where he thrived in college. There is some negative connotation to slot players, but as Godwin and, Amon-Ra, Cooper Kupp have shown, slot players can be productive for fantasy football, and Jalen McMillan certainly displayed some vertical threat as well. But especially if Chris Godwin were to leave, it's very easy tale to spin and to sell McMillan for at least a third-round pick. The third-round pick you paid in 2024, you can at least get that back in 2025 with case for, pushing that up to a second if one or both of the established receivers in this team do end up leaving the Bucs. Now, going to the last player, and this is someone that you could get at the end of your draft, or oftentimes even undrafted. I would probably spend up the late 4th just to make sure I can get this player. And that is Cade Stover, the tight end out of Ohio State. He was drafted in round 4 at pick 123 to the Houston Texans, where he goes to link up with one of his college quarterbacks, CJ Stroud. Now, the value installation here, first, of course, you have to take in the price point. You're basically paying nothing to get Cade Stover, right? But this is the perfect taxi stash candidate, especially, if you can even keep Stover on for the first 2 years of his career. Dalton Schultz is the incumbent and will be the lead tight end for the Houston Texans for 2024, for 2025. That's where a contract out comes in where the Texans could save up to $11.5 million by cutting Schultz after the 2025 season, this could be perfect time for Cade Stover to develop the narrative to build about him playing with CJ Stroud. Stover has a pretty solid receiving profile, but it really doesn't even matter. The narrative just will write itself almost a la Stroud and Tank Dell. And I'm very confident you can return at least a fourth and most likely even more when the time comes for Cade Stover. So I think this is a very cheap value insulated bet to essentially roll that pick forward with a lot more upside. So just to recap the players I went over, we talked about Michael Penix, drafted in the early second, Jonathan Brooks, late first to early second, Jermaine Burton, late second to early third, Jalen McMillan, mid to late third, and Cade Stover as a late fourth slash UDFA. I think these are all players with safe baselines for their value, where you can at least return the same draft capital invested in 2024 when it comes time to your 2025 rookie drafts. But all of these players have case for tremendous upside without any of those scenarios I discussed being too much of a stretch. What happens if Kirk Cousins, has injury issues, looks poor, Penix has to come in and start? What if Higgins continues to make some noise about wanting to leave Cincinnati? All these players are going to see value bumps from situations other than their play, even though their play is likely to be zero or very limited production wise for your fantasy teams. So that was today's topic. We talked about value installation in rookie drafts and how it can help the long-term prospects of your dynasty team. Even if you don't agree with some of the names or the names aren't the ones you want to add to your team, I hope the idea we talked about helps shape your strategy in rookie draft season. Thank you all for watching. Good luck with your rookie drafts. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter at SmallTalkFF. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.